In this episode,
and that's another thing that just is disgusting, really. It shouldn't have that function on it, really.
The apps could be a lot better on a lot of these heat pumps.
There's a few bad eggs out there, but isn't there in all walks of life?
what should a proper service look like?
Boilers, up, down, but yeah, there's a little bit more complexity to a heat pump control.
And if they haven't got one, then send them home because they don't know how to service heat pumps, right?
I'm always surprised when I go to a property and I find the heat pump's on, doors are open because they like their fresh air.
That's a really great question. Now, it's either going to be Y strainer type filters.
You can end up having a really expensive bill.
To me, a service is to find a problem before it's even occurred.
Welcome to another episode of Homeowners Q&A, where today we're covering one of the most overlooked topics when it comes to heat pumps: general maintenance and servicing. Joining us today, we have three experienced professionals who will share their expertise on maintaining heat pumps. And we're joined today by Harland from Guscott Heating Services, David Stanford from Genous, and Daniel Davies, Wales and Northern Ireland Installer of the Year 2024. Welcome, everybody. So whether you're a new heat pump owner or someone who has had a heat pump for years, this episode is here to offer practical advice to keep your heat pump running smoothly and efficiently for years to come. But before we get started, we'd like to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Eve Systems. Eve builds connected smart home devices, and their products like the Eve Thermo and Eve Energy seamlessly integrate into your home while prioritizing privacy. As temperatures drop, we've been relying on Eve Thermo to maintain the perfect temperature, ensuring comfort without wasting energy. The ability to customize each room's heating schedule with ease has given us peace of mind during the colder months. We've been using Eve smart thermostats and smart plugs for years, and their quality is exceptional. They consistently offer reliable performance and are incredibly user-friendly, making it easy to manage your home's energy efficiently, especially during the heating season. We're proud to partner with a brand that aligns so well with our mission at Renewable Heating Hub and that empowers homeowners to create more sustainable and efficient living environments. So let's dive into the maintenance tips every homeowner needs to know. Harland, let's start with you. What are the key maintenance tasks homeowners should be doing regularly to keep their heat pumps running efficiently?
Yeah, so I think one of the key ones is to check the fins outside the back of the heat pump for debris. Definitely in areas where there's like a lot of grass. I actually had one where there was a stable of horses near there, and all the hay naturally gathered towards it, and it covered the whole heat pump. So not only cleaning it and maintaining it, but actually looking at how it's happening to prevent it, and also just keep an eye out while you're looking at that in the winter, especially as it's approaching now. The defrost. The heat pump should obviously defrost effectively, and if it doesn't, that could indicate a problem with the heat pump and avoid further issues. And I think another key one would build up a relationship with an air source heat pump expert who knows what they're doing, just for that little bit of friendly advice over the phone, or if you need someone to come out, you can make things worse by not having the right expert around you rather than someone who's trying to use the internet and stuff. I think a key relationship with someone who's fairly local, monitoring energy costs. I think that's a big one. Sometimes we've had issues with immersions potentially kicking in, identifying that quickly, so looking for fault codes and, as I say, energy costs, any energy differentials, monitoring that, and then again, speaking to an expert who can help you get to the bottom of it.
What about you, Daniel? What do you think?
Biggest issues as well we see sometimes, especially on patios, people put stuff in front of the heat pumps and we get recirculation. Sometimes they park the wheelie bin there, for example. I'm always surprised when I go to a property and I find the heat pump's on, doors are open because they like their fresh air, but they're unnecessarily running that heat pump with the windows and doors open. So just being in control of the energy they put into the property, not wasting it.
There's three things really. Number one is, how are you looking after the thing in terms of your annual service? Are you already having an annual service on your fossil fueled boiler that you had before your heat pump? If you were, then you should be doing the same with your air source heat pump, right? The good news is actually that air source heat pumps are simpler, so there isn't a massive amount that needs to be done compared to a fossil fueled boiler. The second thing is, as Harland mentioned, keeping it clean around there. So your engineer, during his visit for your gas boiler, for example, he's going to look in the flue, is it full of leaves from overhanging trees and things like that? It's no different to our heat pump, Have we got a load of leaves in the back of the thing, or all the fins in the back full of debris and dust and whatnot? And there's absolutely no harm the homeowner, whilst they're once they've got their leaf vac out, they're blowing the leaves in a pile in the garden, doing exactly the same on the back of the heat pump, or maybe even getting a soft brush on those fins and just cleaning it out. We need to get that done so that we've got good efficiency on the heat pump. And the third one is controls, and hopefully we'll get a chance to really elaborate on that one later on during the conversation. How are your controls set up? A modern heat pump doesn't want to be on and off all of the time, cycling or starts per hour, whatever you want to call it. That's inefficient, but also more importantly than that, it's putting strain on the components inside that heat pump. You don't want them on and off all of the time. Like anything, there's a finite number of times that a compressor can operate before it reaches the end of its life. So we want to try and give that heat pump the best chance of having the longest life it can, which is almost always a lot longer than a fossil fuel boiler.
We put our heat pump in 5 years ago, and we've got a little log store in front of it, and we've got trees that are around it. And obviously the leaves fall, and it's very easy to go and actually clear them out. But now that the trees have gotten bigger and more established, we've started to see a lot of moss and green stuff actually getting onto the fins. Is it safe for a homeowner like ourselves to go out there with like a sponge and delicately wipe that off? Or should we be calling a professional to come out? Does it require some sort of special chemicals? I mean, can you strip anything off? What is the right process there, Harland?
Yeah, you can get specific tools. You can get a comb. So as long as you've got the right tool and you take time and you take the care, as long as the fins are, correctly as they should be, you can obviously take a look at how they are, take a photo of it when it's first installed, provided the installer makes sure they're straight and correct to begin with. I've seen a few dented ones from the outset. As long as they're, taking their time, carefully cleaning it, you can get a little spray, like a hand pump spray that we use, and you can spray the back of it, to get, once it's loose, getting it out off. Again, it's just taking time and care, not forcing it, not rushing it. As long as a homeowner does do it carefully, and as I say, make sure those fins are nice and straight.
Is the spray that you mentioned specialized, or can you just take like dishwashing liquid with a sponge and just delicately wipe that off?
Honestly, just water. Yeah, I wouldn't put any sort of chemicals on it. Sometimes we used to use a simple soft brush, really soft brush, and then just spray a bit of water over it, and before you know it, you've got a clean heat pump.
Do you need help understanding your heat pump? Then pick up a copy of From Zero to Heat Pump Hero, an essential guide offering practical advice and basic instructions for new heat pump owners to maximize system efficiency. Available in print and on Kindle, link in the description. So apart from the general maintenance that a homeowner can do, how often should we be calling in professionals to come and service our heat pump, Daniel?
Like any boiler, I'd say every 12 months. Just to keep on top of everything. To me, a service is to find a problem before it's even occurred, to see the starting points of it before it gets out of hand, and then it gets really expensive. If you get a good engineer that you can phone, like Harland said earlier, you can just give them a ring. If your water usage is, hot water usage changes, they can adapt it to that and save you quite a bit over the year. Yeah, you can pick a lot of points up, and you could save a lot of energy just by having that chat once a year.
Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said in the first point. If you'd have your gas boiler serviced engineer, why wouldn't you do the same with your air source heat pump? I mean, the good news is that heat pumps in their design are very, very robust. I mean, think about how often you need to change your fridge because it's actually broken down. It's not very often, right? And it's the same components in your heat pump. It's a compressor, a coil, an expansion valve, and a fan. And these things are designed to work for years and years, decades even. You still need to get it checked over by an engineer every year. And why is that? Well, think about what you do if you were servicing a gas boiler. Your gas engineer is going to have a look at the pipework and the system components. They're going to look and see if there's any leaks and corrosion. And they're going to look inside the boiler, see if there's any corrosion or soot inside there. Exactly the same for our heat pump. We don't have to worry about soot, right? So we're not burning anything. They're also going to check your lagging, to make sure that it's not loose or damaged. Same with your heat pump. So in some ways, more important with your heat pump because you really want to make sure that system's working efficiently and we don't want to be losing our heat. And what else is your engineer going to do with your gas boiler? He's going to have a look and see if the system pressure's right, and if you've got any chemicals in the system there or if they need changing. Exactly the same with your heat pump, no different. The only difference is the chemicals inside your heat pump heating system are more likely to be glycol, which is just an antifreeze because you've got some pipework outside and the heat pump lives outside, right? When you get your engineer round to come and have a look at your heat pump, they're going to have a little tool called a refractometer with them. And if they haven't got one, then send them home because they don't know how to service heat pumps, right? Or your heat pump might have, instead of glycol in the system, it might have antifreeze valves fitted instead. Get them to show you, okay, which type you've got, in which case they won't need their refractometer. So what's the last thing that needs to be done with a gas boiler? Well, somebody's going to have to take their flue gas analyzer to make sure it's running safely and make sure it's running efficiently, because that can create carbon monoxide, which can be a silent killer. Well, we don't have that with our heat pump, so we don't need to worry about it, which is great, right?
You've raised some excellent points there. So one of the most popular threads on our forums at Renewable Heating Hub deals with annual servicing and maintenance from a professional. The thing that has taken me by surprise the most is just how varied the level of service actually is. There are some services where people are paid, and we'll get onto actual specific topics in a minute. There have been some people that have paid about £250 for a guy that literally rocked up for about half an hour, kicked some few things around, had a quick look here, a quick look there. Harland, what should a proper service look like?
I'd encourage the homeowner to ask for a copy of their service record. One customer did actually do their due diligence and said, can I see a copy of what you actually do on the service? And we use a comprehensive form, which is about 2 pages long. That could be like checking the delta T's. We also check the cylinder condition. We check the running. We check the energy usage. We check the consumption. We clean it all. And if it's, by the sea, we then use a certain spray to protect it. We check all the components. We take it all off. We sort of allocate between 1 hour to 2 hours. Again, those people that are turning up, just kicking the can down the road, 30 minutes, we hear these stories, and, unfortunately, I think it could come down to a lack of knowledge, but the homeowner can, request a copy of the service sheet that they're using. And this should eliminate the people that are winging it and the people that aren't, because the people that are going to do it properly, they have those sheets that hopefully they use. Even if it's a paper copy, the people that are doing it properly will record these things because they're technically minded.
What do you normally do during a service, Daniel?
Yeah, quite similar. What I would say is building up a history of the service, because year by year you can see if something's deteriorating. As important as cleaning the evaporator coil, we've got strainers that we need to clean, because we all know that the flow is key for the whole system to work properly. Flow rates on the hot water, all that's working correct. I think more than anything, to me, it's just building up that history. If you haven't been a year before, at least then you can look back at the paperwork of the last installer to see what he found last year, what readings he had, and just have a good look as well how it's been performing. If it's got monitoring on the equipment, just have a quick look through that. That will answer a lot of questions for you.
You're listening to the Renewable Heating Hub Homeowners Q&A, empowering consumers with the knowledge they need to make smarter heating choices. David, we've got a question from a homeowner, and they've asked, how many filters does an air source heat pump typically have, and how often do they need checking or cleaning?
That's a really great question. Now, it's either going to be Y strainer type filters, in which case, realistically, you're going to need your engineer to come and open those up and clean them out for you, or you're going to have a magnetic filter. I much prefer to use the larger magnetic filters, and the reason for that is that is something that a competent DIY or a confident homeowner can do themselves. In that case, your large plastic magnetic filter is a pot with a big magnet inside it. Will have valves on there which allow you to completely isolate it from the system. Firstly, obviously turn off your system, make sure that the water's not running. You can isolate that. You can unscrew the pot, and that pot will have a magnet inside there. You remove the magnet from the sheath. You can wash all of the dirt away from that in your heating system and then put it back together again, and at least you know then that the water that's running around your radiators is relatively clear. But on the outside part of the circuit, which is where the glycol is, that's to be left alone for your engineers.
Our second year with a heat pump, it was Boxing Day. The heat pump went off and we had a flow error. Obviously, panic stations. Thankfully, the support staff were actually working that day at our installers, and they told us that it's more than likely our Y strainer that actually got blocked. The next obvious question to them was, well, where is this Y strainer? Because we were never actually told. Ours was very stupidly located in the heat pump. We had to take the actual metal chassis off, try and get inside of there to actually clean it out. Harland, is this something that you guys typically do during the handover to educate the customer as to where their Y strainer is? And if they do have a flow error, for example, is that something that you would encourage them to maybe check themselves or to clean themselves? How do you guys typically deal with that?
It is a good point, because it's probably our most common thing that we have to deal with. So we are in the midst of building up a bit of a knowledge base and videos on doing that. We don't typically do it on the handover. I think a lot of people are a bit skeptic of doing it, but it is definitely now that we're seeing more of it. The more heat pumps that we are delivering, we are then having, as I say, the majority of the calls are flow errors, and obviously we don't want to keep going out to these properties. We don't do too many, but it is something we're looking at. But like you said, there are some that are in the heat pump. You take the chassis off, and usually they are fairly straightforward, but obviously there's always that small risk of, if something does happen, at least the heat pump's outside, if there's glycol in the system or something like that, you're not talking about a little bit of water, you're talking about blue staining. So you've got to be just a bit careful. We actually use lever valves with strainers in. You just turn the lever off, you get a spanner, you unscrew it, you clean the thing, you put it back on, you turn the lever on. And it's just about the homeowner not turning the heat pump off before actioning and then turning it back on.
Because of the issues that we actually had the Y strainer moved inside our utility room now, and we've got the 2 levers on both sides. So kind of the week before the heating comes on, I clean it out. Daniel, is it mandatory to have a Y strainer on every single heat pump installation?
You'd find most manufacturers' instructions would ask you to fit them. Every install, always follow their guidelines. Don't risk voiding any warranties over something so silly.
So you've actually mentioned the warranty. So David, the one thing that I found really interesting about servicing is that it's actually connected in a lot of cases to the actual warranty of that particular heat pump. And what I don't understand is, if I bought heat pump brand X and I've had it installed by a certain installer who now may have gone out of business or no longer wants to service our heat pump, we then bring in a third party into that equation. How is it that our warranty is still kind of kept in place based on, a distant installer that's now servicing this heat pump for us annually?
Well, I don't think that's too different to a lot of boiler manufacturers do. What these manufacturers are trying to do is they're trying to get some kind of brand tie-in to their engineers. So a lot of the time the warranty is actually, or extended warranties at least, so like a 7-year warranty, for example, over the standard 1 or 2 year warranties. Usually that comes off the back of that engineer having gone on a training course to fully understand that air source heat pump, to understand how to install it properly, to understand how to set it up properly, and all of those things. And that way, that manufacturer in a way is protecting you as the homeowner that heat pump has been fitted correctly, and therefore you get the longer warranty with it. What I would say is having spent quite a few years in the merchant industry, most manufacturers are understanding of these sorts of situations. And actually, if you go back to the manufacturer and say, look, I've got this heat pump, it is being serviced every year, can the warranty be transferred across to me? Most manufacturers are pretty understanding, they get it, and that will happen. There's a few bad eggs out there, but isn't there in all walks of life?
Planning to install an air source heat pump? Then get your copy of Bodge Buster. It's packed with must-ask questions, real homeowner insights, and a practical guide for a smoother installation. Available in print and on Kindle, link in the description. What's the worst case that actually can come out of not maintaining your heat pump properly, Harland?
You can end up having a very expensive bill. Like everything, cars, boilers, you fail to maintain these things, and you fail to identify it. Sometimes it's a manufacturing fault. We've identified them and stopped it from being a big issue. You can identify problems and be proactive rather than reactive. I think the biggest thing is, you don't want to end up with a compressor that's gone down, end up having a whole new heat pump and it not being covered by warranty because you haven't done the servicing.
So this is a bit of an unfair question maybe, but we're going to start with you, Daniel. So this is again a comment from the forums where somebody said, my service was recently carried out by the original installer for an eye-watering £375 and took less than an hour to complete. How much should a service cost?
From my own research, there's a massive variation on cost. This is a problem which we've got in the gas and oil industry as well. You might have someone that's cheaper than you servicing. They're in and out in half a time. It makes you wonder what they do. So this is the reason why really we need a check sheet on the end of the job to see what they've checked, what they've recorded, because unfortunately the way things are cutthroat out there, in one hand you're saving them money that year, but you could be costing more on a breakdown later on in the year.
And do you think it's a regional thing, Harland? So obviously you said you're in Kent, Daniel's in West Wales. Do geographies just naturally, some geographies are just more expensive than others?
No, I just think it's just who you get. You ring a multiple of 10 people, there are going to be people that chance it. There's going to be people that are good with loads of knowledge that are extremely fair value, maybe underpriced, or you've got someone who's extremely knowledgeable and understands that value and then charges for that value. So it just depends on the culture of that company that you bring in, really. Make sure they're accredited, make sure they've got feedback, reviews, do your research on the company, make sure that you're getting good value for money.
David, are there any tools or apps that can help you monitor the performance of your heat pump that might be able to preemptively tell you whether something is potentially going pear-shaped?
Only recently I was talking with a company called Homely, who are a controls manufacturer. They've actually designed their products specifically to talk directly with the electronics inside certain heat pumps. For example, with Genous, one of the heat pumps that we sell is the ideal heat pump. If at the point that you've chosen your controls for that heat pump and you've chosen something like Homely, then this can both control your heat pump really efficiently, so it will modulate the heat output of the heat pump to match directly what's happening outside, but also the temperature inside. So you turn your oven on and it senses, okay, there's extra heat in the house, we can dial down a little bit here and increase your efficiencies. But also this kind of control, and there's more like this coming out on the market, is able to talk directly with the equipment. It can also give you information on how the heat pump is running as well, in the same way that the controls that the original manufacturer supplies with their equipment can.
What about you, Daniel? Are there any apps or tools that you encourage your homeowners or customers to use?
A lot of the heat pumps out there now come with their own monitoring apps anyway. I've not really got much experience on the third-party ones which you see on top of the scops and stuff. I am thinking about maybe joining that, but I haven't yet. Again, if you haven't got any monitoring, just an honest discussion with the customer. Realistically, how many times have we been to a property and they're storing hot water at 60 degrees unnecessary when you could have stored it at 45 degrees and saved a heck of a lot of energy by doing so. For us around here, most people haven't got the monitoring facilities, so it does come down to discussion most of the time round our way.
What about you, Harland? Any tools that drive you towards the top of the scops?
We're looking at using planet devices. What we want to be able to do is if we need to make an adjustment, we just think on a time saving perspective, if we can tweak it internally, that could help, and it can just help flag up potential issues, and we can just monitor and maintain. Really, the apps could be a lot better on a lot of these heat pumps. I think that's crazy that there's a third party rather than just a heat pump manufacturer could just build their own in and they could stand out from the crowd. So we've been flexible in actually taking an approach of, like, if it don't work, we work with them to make something suitable within their budget. Some customers say, I want to have a third party, actually. I'm not liking the way this is set up. Looking at the customer, what their needs are. Some are technically gifted and love playing around with it, and some others just want it to work, which is great. So it varies house to house. It's just so much more different than a boiler thermostat. So we're monitoring and testing various ways and seeing what works best for us and the customer, really.
Have you got questions about heat pumps and renewables? Then head over to the forums at Renewable Heating Hub for practical advice from thousands of fellow homeowners and heat pump users. David, you mentioned at the outset that you wanted to speak a bit more about the controls. Is that kind of where it kind of ties into what Harland just said?
People who are transitioning over from fossil fuel boilers to air source heat pumps kind of have to understand what it needs in terms of energy to get your house hot. If you think of your gas boiler as being like your V8 Range Rover Sport or whatever, you're cruising along the motorway at 70 miles an hour, it's guzzling fuel and it's a massively heavy vehicle, right? But it's got a V8 motor in there, so it's no problem. It can do that at 70 miles an hour, without even thinking. If you take your 1.4 litre mid-size Euro box or whatever, it'll be doing the same thing. It'll be cruising along at 40 miles an hour. Big difference is the Rover V8 is going to be getting 20 miles to the gallon, and the 1.4 Euro box is going to be getting 50 miles to the gallon. And this is the same kind of numbers that we have difference in terms of the amount of energy that a heat pump uses and the amount of energy that a gas boiler uses. The main difference is if you start at 0 miles an hour in your Rover V8, you get to 70 miles an hour on the motorway in 8 seconds or something. But your Eurobox takes twice as long, and that's the same with your heat pump. It takes twice as long to get there. It will always get there. It can do 70 miles an hour on the motorway, no problem. There's no worries of your heat pump being able to get to the temperature that you need, but you've got to accept it takes longer to get there. It's not a hammer to crack a walnut. It's setting up your controls so that they work well for you. What does that mean? In the real world, that means setback temperatures. If you don't know what that is, if you want your house to be 21 degrees, with your gas boiler, you may well have gone, right, I want my house to be 21 degrees or I want it to be off. I'm happy for it to be frozen inside. Your heat pump doesn't want to do that. Remember, it's going to take twice as long as your Range Rover to get to 70 miles an hour. So what we do instead is you set setback temperatures. So that means if you want your room to be 21 degrees, degrees or your house to be 21 degrees. When you're not using your house, when you're out, you're at work or whatever, then use a setback temperature which is around about 3 or 4 degrees less. Your heat pump's still going to be running, but it's just going to be ticking along using very little energy. It's going to be really, really efficient.
Daniel, are there any telltale signs that there's something that's gone wrong with your air source heat pump?
Customers might hear it short cycling much more or freezing over. Being vigilant with just the sound of it, if the sound changes suddenly. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. If it freezes more, continuous cycling. Fault codes, check the fault codes. And just the excessive electric bills. You'll know soon enough, really, if there's a fault. Unfortunately, it's going to cost you and you're going to have to repair it.
Harland, what are the most common mistakes that you see homeowners make when it comes to running their heat pumps?
I think it's the transition of the controls, turning it up, turning it down, and playing around with the controls where the weather comp is set. So because the radiators aren't red hot, they're like, well, I'm going to turn it up, and they're expecting a rapid change. What we tend then to find is that the settings are all messed up. On the old controls, it was fine, boilers up, down, but yeah, there's a little bit more complexity to a heat pump control.
I heard a really funny description of that. Some installers refer to them as button bashers. So, it's just guys that are just randomly pressing stuff. And we actually heard quite an amusing anecdote where there was a guy that actually wanted to get his COP, sky high during the winter and pushed his flow rate so low that the heat pump went into a death spiral. And they couldn't get it out of that. So I think the biggest advice, Daniel, is that if you do want to make adjustments to your weather comp or to anything on your system, it's probably most sensible to call your installer.
100%. I'd say majority of the breakdowns we attend is normally controls issues. When I say that, it's people playing with the controls, really, going into installer mode. Let's face it, it's difficult for us to understand every controller on the market, so we can't expect the customer to be going through it. That's the issue. There's so many parameters you can change on it. It's a minefield. I would suggest they keep well away and get their engineer just to do it. It's frightening how many heat pumps out there are not on weather comp, on set point only. And that's another thing that just is disgusting, really. It shouldn't have that function on it, really. It just annoys the hell out of me.
So that's a wrap for today's episode on general heat pump maintenance, and a huge thank you to our guests, Harland, David, and Daniel. And of course, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Eve for sponsoring today's episode. Eve's commitment to quality and privacy in smart home technology aligns perfectly with our mission of promoting energy-efficient solutions for homeowners. If you're looking to optimize your home's heating and energy management, Eve's thermo and energy devices are definitely the way to go. And don't miss out on their latest Eve Thermo Comfort Set, link in the description. If you have any more questions or need any further advice, make sure to visit the Renewable Heating Hub website, follow us on social media, and don't forget to subscribe. Stay warm, stay green, stay tuned. Bye-bye.